From 1500 to 1920, as European states extended their global reach, sea power was primarily expressed through fleets of line-of-battle ships. This projectile era emphasized surface navies, spanning both the age of sail and steam. During both eras, power signified throw weight, penetrative capability, anticipated damage, rate of fire, firing range, and hit probability. By 1840, Britain and France entered a naval competition known as the Great Race. This all came to a head in 1860, when Britain built the first ocean-going, armor-plated, iron-hulled warship, the HMS Warrior. There was only one thing Warrior lacked: the ability to use their home nation's IP addresses while at sea. Yes, that means they were lacking our sponsor today, NordVPN. We'll give you a special deal at nordvpn.com/kingsandgenerals. Sometimes changing your IP makes a big difference. If you're out in the world and want to access something only provided to your home country, like a government site or streaming service, you can use one of NordVPN's thousands of servers. With one click, all your traffic goes through an ultra-fast server in your home country, or indeed a country of your choice. And yes, you might want to pick other countries too, because if you don't actually possess an ocean-going steamship, then accessing low prices or increased availability of goods in other markets is difficult. But with NordVPN, you can buy like a local anywhere, and that even means you get extra content from stuff you already bought, as loads of media subscriptions have different libraries for each region. Jump around in seconds with NordVPN and get everything you're secretly paying for. Plus, having your traffic handled by NordVPN means your ISP can't see it, and Nord logs none of your activity. Perfect for avoiding surveillance, ads, and data theft. Right now, if you buy a 2-year subscription, you'll get 4 months extra free, but only if you use our link, nordvpn.com/kingsandgenerals. They offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk in giving it a go. That's nordvpn.com/kingsandgenerals. The transition from sail to steam was not instantaneous, nor was it linear. During the Age of Sail, over 3 centuries, protection, mobility, and their related technologies changed little, even as ships grew larger and more capable. To learn more about this, please check out our video on the dawn of the Dreadnought. We know you will love it. The turn of the 19th century unleashed a flurry of experimentation with steam propulsion, beginning with paddle steamers that could push warships beyond the reach of wind. The United States and France were among the early adopters, each pursuing steam propulsion to outpace and outgun wooden adversaries. In 1814, Robert Fulton designed the first paddle-wheel warship, Demologos, conceived to defend New York Harbor against the British. By the late 1820s, commercial paddle steamers along the Atlantic coast had become common, and navies began experimenting with similar power plants on warships. Yet early single-cylinder reciprocating steam engines were heavy and fuel inefficient. By the early 1840s, paddle frigates with a displacement of 3,000 tons emerged, but they were impractical due to their bulky side paddles, which hindered the mounting of large numbers of broadside guns. They were vulnerable to damage, and splitting the ship into 2 fighting halves, the fore and aft gun decks, complicated fire control. The ships themselves were still wooden, and the combination of heavy propulsion plants with the need for protection, stability, and seaworthiness strained wooden hulls. The propulsion still demanded significant weight and space, leaving little room for heavier armament, ammunition, and stores. The decisive technological leap forward toward practical, fast, and well-protected steam warships came with the screw propeller. The British achieved a dramatic breakthrough in 1839 with their first screw propeller steamship, Archimedes, which demonstrated the screw's superiority over the traditional paddle wheel. The Rattler, launched by the Royal Navy in 1843, proved the point in a dramatic tug-of-war against the paddle-wheeler Alecto in 1845. The screw propulsion was more efficient, and could be placed underwater out of sight of enemy fire, freeing space for armor and guns. The propulsion plant's weight could be better contained, allowing more robust protection without sacrificing speed or seaworthiness. Most important to navies was that the elimination of the cumbersome paddle wheels meant that broadside-firing ships could now be machine-powered. The adoption of screw-driven steamships quickly moved beyond experimental vessels. By the mid-1840s, Britain was constructing screwliners, ship-of-the-line hybrids that still carried sails but now depended on steam for propulsion. As propulsion transformed, so too did firepower. In 1821, the French artillery officer Henri-Joseph Paixhans published his vision of shellfire that could penetrate wooden hulls and upend the era's tactical assumptions. The idea of heavy shell-fired Paixhans guns mounted on ships with armor soon took hold. Paixhans also expressed a broader strategic concept of nouvelle force maritime, consisting of frigate-size and high-speed smaller vessels crewed by 30 to 50 men. Since it was expected that Britain would follow suit, it would also be necessary for the warships to adopt armor. Paixhans claimed all of this would neutralize Britain's traditional advantage of a large seafaring population, so that 20,000 sailors, born and nurtured on the ocean, would no longer have the power to dictate the law to the entire world. France began testing Paixhans guns in 1824 and adopted them fleet-wide by the 1830s, while Britain did not delay long in following suit. The upshot was that firepower was evolving toward greater penetrating power, longer ranges, and shells that could disable a wooden hull more quickly, which in turn forced navies to pursue greater protection, mobility, and firepower in tandem. The Paixhans vision did not abolish sail or make wooden ships instantly obsolete, but it clarified a new path. Systems that combined heavier firepower with better protection and mobility would redefine the balance of naval power. Screwliners with Paixhans guns dominated the scene for a decade. Then, in 1845, Dupuy de Lôme submitted a proposal to build an ironclad steam-powered warship. The result was launched in 1850, a 28-gun warship with a displacement of 2,366 tons, named Napoleon. She embodied a new approach that combined a modern steam plant with armor considerations, something that wooden ships would soon struggle to match. The British hastily responded with their Agamemnon, and for the next decade, the wooden screwliner remained the centerpiece of a naval arms race between France and Britain known as the Great Race. Britain had the advantage in numbers, but France had superior design and individual ship performance. During the Crimean War, a small Turkish fleet was annihilated by the Russians at Sinope on the Black Sea, mainly by shell-firing guns that easily destroyed the Turkish wooden vessels. This led Napoleon III to request that 10 armoured, steam-propelled floating batteries be built for his navy so that they could safely bombard Russia's fortifications in the Baltic and Crimean Peninsula. However, France's lack of industrial infrastructure led it to ask Britain to build 5 of these. In October 1855, 3 French floating batteries joined 13 ships of the line to bombard a Russian fort on the Kinburn Peninsula. The vessel's 4-inch iron cladding withstood numerous shell hits as its guns silenced the Russian batteries. It was a milestone in naval history, marking the first time that armored warships engaged in battle and successfully violated Admiral Horatio Nelson's taboo of dueling with land-based fortifications. In 1857, the Commission Supérieure Centrale announced that, as a result of the greater penetrative power of rifled guns, all work on wooden warships was to be halted, and hence all men of war would be ironclads. Dupuy de Lôme was appointed Directeur du Matériel and would design the first fast and ocean-going ironclad frigate. In 1858, the British Admiralty assessed the balance of power at sea against France and recognized 2 threats. The first was the timber gap. France held a stockpile of 133,000 loads against Britain's 70,000. Barely enough to build 4 line-of battleships, 11 frigates, and 13 corvettes. The second came in a report from Lieutenant Colonel R. Clement, who paid a visit to the French Navy's building yard in Toulon. Clement had observed the construction of a large steam-powered frigate that would contain 36 heavy guns, most being rifled 50-pounders and capable of tossing 80-pound hollow percussion shot. The warship's motive power would be 800 to 900 horsepower steam, and she was cased in iron. None of these technologies was new, but no one had yet put them all together. What Clement had witnessed was La Gloire, the lead hull in a group of 4 ironclads. Launched on November 24, 1859, she was a 5,360-ton broadside ironclad with a wooden hull armed with 36 rifled guns. She carried 4.7-inch armor plates backed by 17 inches of timber, capable of resisting British 68-pounders at a distance of 20 meters. She pulled a maximum speed of 13.1 knots and sported sails alongside her steam-powered screw. La Gloire effectively rendered Britain's fleet of over 200 wooden ships of the line obsolete, igniting widespread alarm over the risk of invasion and the loss of naval supremacy. After her launch, Dupuy de Lôme proposed that France embark on building 10 more sea-going ironclads and 11 armoured floating batteries within 18 months. The 1860 programme was approved, including 9 armour-plated wooden hull ships and 1 all-iron vessel, alongside 7 floating batteries. The fleet was expensive, but Dupuy de Lôme assured the Ministère de la Marine that the warships' impact on the balance of power at sea would more than justify their price tag. Britain's reaction to La Gloire was immediate and jolting. If Britain was to maintain its naval standing, something had to be done, and done quickly. The Admiralty invited proposals from commercial firms for an ironclad that could best the French threat. Iron had already begun to prove its worth as a shipbuilding material. It offered greater strength and more internal volume than wood, a combination that promised sturdier hulls and better protection without sacrificing space for machinery or munitions. The era's first iron-built vessel had already demonstrated the potential in civilian service, the Ironclad, launched in 1821 for the London-Paris route. The Royal Navy's own foray into iron came a decade later with HMS Albert, launched in 1840. With iron now established as a viable medium for warship construction, the Admiralty turned to 2 engineers to push the concept forward: Isaac Watts, the Navy's chief constructor, and Thomas Lloyd, the chief engineer. They would produce 2 ironclad ships, the HMS Warrior on the Thames and Black Prince on the Clyde, that would blend the old and the new. Their guns would be arrayed in long broadsides like a traditional man of war, and the ships could be powered by either steam or sail. Although they were classified as frigates, these vessels were intended as capital ships and were dubbed ironclads. The design aimed to outclass La Gloire in speed, protection and armament, yet it bore limits. The armour belts could not blanket the entire hull, and vital areas such as the steering gear would remain vulnerable. Warrior, the larger of the 2, progressed rapidly from laydown to service. Construction began in May 1859, and she entered service in October 1861. She marked a milestone as the world's first seagoing ironclad warship built entirely of wrought iron for its frame, plating, and structural elements. The hull employed a box girder design to provide longitudinal strength while keeping weight down relative to a wooden hull. Its cellular structure reinforced both battlefield resilience and the stress of ocean travel, with iron plates riveted to the frames in watertight joints. A clipper bow improved hydrodynamic efficiency for speeds under sail or steam, and at the fore stood a figurehead carved from wood, depicting a classical warrior with sword and shield. Warrior measured about 380 feet in length and displaced roughly 9,284 tons. The midships armour belt consisted of 4.5 inches of wrought iron, backed by 18 inches of teak, with interlocking iron plates bolted to the hull in sizable blocks. The armour covered the central portion of the ship, about 213 feet in length, rising roughly 16 feet above the waterline. The ends remained unarmoured, but were divided into watertight compartments to limit flooding in the event of damage. The armament evolved during construction and over the early years of service. Initially, Warrior carried a broadside of 40 smoothbore 68-pounder guns, 19 on each side of the main deck, and 1 on the forecastle and a chase gun in the bow and stern. As construction progressed, the arrangement shifted to 26 muzzle-loading 68-pounders on the main deck, 10 Armstrong rifled breechloaders, and 4 40-pounder Armstrong guns on the upper deck, with smaller guns for boats. Between 1864 and 1867, the armament was revised again to 24 rifled muzzle loaders of 7 inches and 4 8-inch rifles, with all guns capable of firing both solid shots and shells. Warrior was ship-rigged, with a sail area of around 48,400 square feet, capable of about 13 knots under sail alone. When steam power was added, a 2-cylinder trunk engine built by John Penn & Sons drove a single propeller via 10 rectangular boilers, delivering roughly 5,772 indicated horsepower and achieving about 14.08 knots on sea trials. The combined use of sail and steam could push her to around 17.5 knots. Her call capacity, about 853 long tons, gave a range of roughly 2,100 nautical miles at 11 knots. Among the more distinctive features were a hoisted propeller weighing about 26 tons that could be raised to reduce drag under sail, and funnels that could telescope to minimize wind resistance. Warrior's crew comprised roughly 50 officers and 656 ratings. She stood as a direct assertion of Britain's industrial prowess and naval ambition, more heavily armed than the Gloire and built entirely of iron, marking the emergence of the first true seagoing ironclad warship. Yet Warrior would not fire a shot in anger for some years. Commissioned into the Royal Navy on August 1, 1861, under Captain Arthur Cochrane, she spent her early years as the fleet's flagship showpiece, leading the Channel Squadron to patrol home waters from Northern Europe to the Eastern Atlantic. Warrior escorted royalty on foreign visits and flew Britain's flag in courtesy calls at home and abroad, the living embodiment of a nation's pride in its industrial and maritime supremacy. By 1862, navies across Europe had adopted ironclads. However, the first battles using them would take place across the Atlantic. At the time of the Warrior's launch, the American Civil War was underway, and politically, the Confederates were more favored in Europe. The Union Navy was acutely aware that if the Royal Navy were drawn into intervention with ironclads like Warrior, it would be at a grave disadvantage. This, together with the Confederates' conversion of a steam icebreaker, the Enoch train, into the ironclad CSS Manassas, spurred the Union to develop a fleet of armored turret ships. The first battle between ironclads broke out on March 9, 1862, when the CSS Virginia, converted from the hull of the USS Merrimac into an ironclad Casemate gunship, faced the USS Monitor at Hampton Roads. The two ironclads fought for about 3 hours, each trying to ram the other while their shells bounced off the armor. The clash drew worldwide attention, demonstrating that armored ships could dominate traditional wooden warships, and signaling the obsolescence of the wooden wall. The indecisive duel prompted a broader strategic reaction. Britain and France halted construction of wooden hull warships, and shifted emphasis to revolving turret designs, recognizing that the age of wooden walls was ending, and that iron and steam would shape naval power for generations to come. The launch of HMS Warrior did more than introduce a new class of ship. It signaled a fundamental shift in naval power. By marrying a wrought iron hull, steam propulsion, and evolving armament, Warrior embodied a move away from wooden walls toward ironclad fleets. It also spurred a short-lived Anglo-French arms race, but British maritime supremacy would remain unchallenged for the following 3 decades. The French knew they could not compete, and as a result, adopted the Jeune de Colle doctrine, postulating fleets of small, fast, and heavily armed craft, becoming known as torpedo boats, operating in coastal waters as a counter to the enemy's battle fleet. By 1866, the Royal Navy had ordered its first ocean-going turret ship, HMS Captain, though she still relied on auxiliary sails. Naval gunnery would progressively embrace larger caliber weapons with greater range, replacing broadsides of cannon with rotating turrets or barbettes. Muzzle loading gave way to breech loading, and by the 1870s, wooden ships of the line had vanished. By 1883, Warrior was superseded by newer, better armed and better protected ships. On May 14th, she entered Portsmouth for the last time under her own power. In her 22 years of service, 6 years were spent in full commission and 8 as a first-line unit. The Warrior archetype seeded a design norm that all major navies would adopt, the pre-dreadnought, a standard compromise that endured until 1906, when HMS Dreadnought redefined power, protection, and propulsion and ignited the Anglo-German naval arms race. More videos on naval technology are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing. It helps immensely. Our patrons and YouTube members can watch more than 250 exclusive videos. Join their ranks via the link in the description or by pressing the join button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.